All right, good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Ronald Gordon with Texas in Color, and we bring to you some of the candidates just running for Texas, and we bring other people on. Like today, we have Shay Cathey here today, and it is a treat to talk to her after reading her bio. And it's an honor to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Honored to be here with you.
Okay, so let's get right straight to it. Can you tell us about yourself and what brought you to pursue this career path?
Okay, well, I am a fifth generation Texan. Texans love to brag about being from Texas. And so I'm a fifth generation Texan. I was born in Dallas. I am a Gen Xer. I have a brother who's a baby boomer, and our parents were born in the Jim Crow 30s. And so we grew up in a space where our family dynamic was just the four of us across the different generations. Our parents are people of faith. And so having had parents that paid poll taxes and then actually saw just a demonstrative change in America, given their upbringing and being able to go to college. My father served in the military. He was drafted just 2 months after he married my mother, believe it or not, and he served his 2 years and came home and they started a family. And then he worked at a union shop. And my mother was a precinct chair, so they were those young adults that you hear about in the '60s that were part of the civil rights movement and just saw all that change happen in Texas. And so that just kind of bled over into our home. They served well at church. Our faith values centered our house. But they also served well in their community. And so between my dad's military service, his union service and church service, and my mother became a precinct chair in our community. She worked at polls and she became a precinct chair. And so she did this for the better part of 50 years until she passed away last year. And so my childhood was really shaped by that sense of giving back the community. I mentioned, so I'm a Gen Xer. My brother's 9 years older than me.
Oh,
And
wow.
so growing up in the '80s, I was born in the '70s. My parents, one, couldn't afford babysitters and just quite honestly didn't believe in them, if we're honest. So that forced me to spend a lot of time with my mother. And so she took me with her when she would be block walking, when she was working for candidates. And my mother was somebody who always volunteered. For the candidates of her choice, because she felt like that was a real opportunity for her to see transformation in her communities. And so I got to witness her volunteering, never getting paid, picking someone, evaluating candidates, if you will, picking somebody who she felt best represented her and her ideas. And then she would go work for them. She would block walk, she'd make phone calls. They used to call them flagging cars. Like she would go put, those leaflets on cars in our neighborhoods, at, just any space. And I saw her do that. But I saw her take charge of her destiny and working for that. And then I also saw the community change once they were able to begin to elect leaders who understood their values, and eventually leaders who looked like them, right? Once we
Yeah.
got to single member districts and those kind of things, they were able to have actual candidates and office holders who looked like them. So that just really kind of shaped my childhood. So for me, voting was just something that everyone did. I didn't know that people didn't vote. I didn't know that it wasn't something that everybody's family did on Saturday. I thought every girl spent her Saturday knocking on doors, asking people to vote for their candidate. And so I voted for the first time for my college dorm. I went to Southwestern Christian College first, a small HBCU in Terrell, Texas, before I transferred to the University of Texas. And I voted in 1990 for the first time by absentee ballot. And my roommate and other friends were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm voting. Where's y'all's ballot? Aren't y'all voting by absentee? From your home state." And it's just something that I've just always done. Again, I thought that's what everyone did. And so after college, my career kind of led me into politics. I worked for the Senate Legislative Black Caucus. There were two Black senators in 1996. And in 2024, guess what? There are still just two Black state senators
Oh, wow.
in Texas. So I worked for them. I worked for the Texas Democratic Party. I came home, worked in county government, worked for a Black newspaper, then kind of transitioned back into politics. And as I was working this day job, I got married. I worked for State Senator Royce West again, returned to county government. There was still a pull for me to want to participate in the political process outside of my work because I worked for the government. And so I ran in 2006 for the State Democratic Executive Committee. And basically, that's a real fancy title for two people from each then Senate district in the state that serve as your state party leaders. And so I did that in 2006. And over the course of getting reelected over 2 years in 2022, I became the longest tenured African American on the state Democratic Executive Committee. And there was a vacancy in the role of vice chair. And the Texas Democratic Party rules, our chair and vice chair must be gender balanced. It's a part, it's our party rule. People have different, differing opinions about that. So our chair was a male, and so we needed a female to run for vice chair. And so I decided to run for the interim office, which was March through June, because there would be an election in 2022 at our state convention. So I did that, and I ran for vice chair in 2022 in Dallas for this full 4-year term. And that's kind of my story. That's how I got to this position as vice chair of the Texas Democratic Party. But like I said, so much of it was shaped by my mother early on, seeing her work, seeing her motivated to have her community served better, and then electing people who would serve better. And so that was she is my role model for that. She's now an ancestor, but I think she would be proud of how particularly women of color, but all women have begun to see themselves in roles of leadership as opposed to roles of staff and working behind the scenes. So I'm honored to be in this space at this particular time in our country's history, knowing just how far we've come from a little girl who used to, walk around with her mom asking people to vote and pushing cards at polls. So that's a little bit of my story.
Okay. Well, what drives you to persist in the fight for democracy in Texas, particularly given the numerous challenges that you face?
Well, what drives me is that we're not done. Like I said, I had parents who've seen so much change in their lifetimes, and I've seen change. Like I said, I've been voting since 1990, and it was 2008 before we ever elected a black president of the United States. And even in Texas, I'm proud to come from a long line of black vice chairs, one male black vice chair, and several black women who have served as vice chair, including the late Barbara Jordan, the late Eddie Bernice Johnson, Darylyn Riles Davis, and women who I have followed recently. But we've never had a black chair of the Texas Democratic Party. So that's what drives me in this fight, is that there are still things that we need to achieve, still things to accomplish. I'm married. We've married for 20 years. We have 3 teenage sons. One's a freshman in college, and we have twin sons who are in the 10th grade. And in their lifetime, and in their short lifetime, they've lived under a black president and now a black vice president. And so to them, that's the norm. And I want
Yeah.
that to continue to be their norm, that people of color are not reduced to less significant roles simply because people see them as other and see them as less qualified. And not just racial issues. I mean, we still have a lot of equity issues in Texas in terms of our health care. We're still one of the last states that have not expanded Medicaid. So we have poorer people in Texas who are not getting the health care that they deserve. Our federal dollars are being sent to the federal government and not returned back because of party politics. And so those things continue to drive me. I think everyone should have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they should be able to do that in this country, in this state, without the systemic oppression and these ideologies that continue to govern how we vote, how long we can vote, the process by which we vote, and that are still working to put barriers in our place to help us achieve true equity. So I'm driven by that. And it comes from a place of hope. I'm a person of faith. I'm driven by my values. I believe that everyone should have a right to live their lives free from oppression, you know, dare I say terror in some parts of our state and certainly in some parts of our country, and just the belief in justice. So that's really what drives me to continue to do this volunteer work outside of the things that I do in other spaces.
Okay. What is your vision for the Democratic Party of Texas in the next few years? And what are your key priorities you believe the party should be focusing on?
Well, so every 2 years, we have a state Democratic convention and we vote on a platform, and our platform shapes our values for the party. So, our convention this year was in El Paso. And so on June the 8th, our delegates spoke and we affirmed our platform. And if you're listening and you want to go see what that is, you can go to texasdemocrats.org/platform and you can see it for yourself. But our beliefs are shaped by these democratic values. We believe that government can be as good as the people. We have faith in democracy built on, the honored values of family, privacy, freedom, and fairness that every Texan deserves. So our platform is laid out, and so that's what drives the things that we advocate for in between our conventions. It drives what our candidates run on, and it helps us shape the Texas that we want. I will say succinctly that we think that all Texans have the right and should not be taken away the right to vote, the right to free and fair participation in the democratic process, the right to privacy. We believe in freedom. So our values are driven by what our delegates have put forth in our platform, and so we strive to shape our activities and our candidates and our governance around those things.
Okay. Now, what is Texas Democratic Party strategy for increasing voter turnout, especially among the underrepresented group of young voters, communities of color in rural Texas?
Wow. So that's a good one. That's a that's a good question. So the Texas Democratic Party, we're actually challenged and motivated, and we're like powered by these groups that you've listed that are underrepresented. We know what it takes to mobilize our communities. We work hard in our communities because those are the communities that are impacted every day by the Republican Party's extreme and sometimes reckless government. And so this year we have a coordinated campaign entitled the Texas Offense, and it's designed to meet each voter where they are. So we're on college campuses, we're in communities, we are block walking, we're phone banking. We're sending mail ballots. We're expanding our voter protection program so that each voter, each and every eligible Texas voter, can feel secure when they're casting their ballot. We're doing all of these things because we understand that we need to try to meet every voter where they are because it's a really unique space and time that we're in. And so we have 6 more weeks, 6 weeks from yesterday to election day, and our staff is working overtime. We're planning rallies because this is a statewide effort. If we want Texas to look like what we believe it should look like and what it can look like, then we're going to have to be willing to put in that overtime to make sure that we stop some of these extreme agendas. And a part of that includes electing Colin Allred, and bringing Ted Cruz back home to Texas or perhaps to Mexico, wherever he likes to vacation. Um, and that we elect Texas Democrats up and down the ballot, particularly in our state house races, because you mentioned rural communities and our public education system is under attack. And in rural communities, the public education system is what makes the difference in the type of future those students will have. And without a high school diploma, being undereducated makes them more likely to be underemployed. And so we're doing what we can, but we're mobilizing those communities specifically to try to help them get out the vote so that we can elect the people who will help Texas to be what it's meant to be.
Wow. Okay. Given the political landscape in Texas, what strategy do you believe are most effective for winning a candidate to win a statewide and local election?
Wow. So we're going to address the elephant in the room, right? Texas has not won a statewide office since 1994. Um, Texas is big. And I think some of the challenges we have is in getting our messages across that this is the party where people can find themselves. So what we are doing, we like I mentioned, we have our coordinated campaign program. We're committed to doing that, and I think it's important that people understand Texas really isn't a red state. It's a not voting state, right? So like we like to say that we're purple. But it's really it's a not voting state because clearly our message isn't getting across well. And so that's why this coordinated campaign is really targeting specific communities so they can see where they see themselves in the party, um, just to help us turn out the vote.
Okay. Okay. When you talk about turn out to vote, and I'm just going to back up about the rural area.
Okay.
Um, the rural area is important because it seems to me by talking to people out there, they are the ones that most misinformed or not informed at all. And to get them to know exactly what the Democrats are doing, we got to let them know what we. In other words, people don't know when they elect somebody in office. They don't know exactly what that office does. They just elect them, and we have to educate the voters on that.
That's an excellent point. And I think that is what we are really trying to do differently in this cycle. So sometimes for my day job, like the job, where I work in government, so I get invited to go to career fairs, right? So most of the time they tell you, come in and tell about your career fair. But when you're talking to students, I've tried this approach. So I'll walk into a classroom and I'll say, tell me what you want to be. And you hear all the things: doctor, lawyer. I've heard fashion designer, police officer. So when they tell me what they want, I tell them where Dallas County can use them, because in that moment they don't want to hear what I do. They want to tell me what their need is. So what I'm trying to do is help them see themselves at my place of business. So I think that's the approach that we're trying this cycle with voters, is going into their communities, listening to them. What do you expect from your elected officials? What do you want? What do you need? And I guarantee you, most of the things that Texans want, they can find in our party platform and in the Democratic candidates who are running for office. And I think that's been a disconnect, that we're working. I mean, like I said, it's a big state, and one, you have to have the resources to try to reach the people. And so when we are going out there now, we're asking them. Or I will say that I'm asking them, in addition, when I go to a community, what do you need? What do you expect from your leaders? What do you expect from your candidates? What do you expect from the Democratic Party? What do you expect from me as the vice chair? And when you let people talk and they tell you what they need, then you're better able to serve them. So when a rural community says we are concerned about the lack of public schools, if if the vouchers pass, we have a significant number of counties that don't even have private schools in their
Right.
area. So even if this passes, that doesn't help them. So when they say they're concerned about the state of public education, well, this candidate is going to help stop vouchers. When they talk about access to health care, well, we have a Democrat who is sponsoring a bill to help do these things. So I think it's important to go into those communities, hear what they need, and it's in our platform. Like I mentioned, we'll be able to show them and share with them exactly what we can do to meet their need. So I think it's a matter of reversing the conversation instead of going in and saying this is what we believe, because we have a lot of things we believe. Our platform is very robust, it's very diverse, and I could talk to you for 2 hours about it, but I may not hit the one thing that's important to you. So now I've wasted 2 hours and you still aren't convinced that we're the best party for you. So that's what I think we're doing differently this year. It's one of the things that I'm doing when I'm sending out communications to delegates. We can sort them by zip code, we can sort them by county, we can sort them by caucus, and try to remind them, hey, this is important to you. This is what the Democrats are doing about that.
Okay. So, how is the party engaging and mobilizing voters, particularly from historically unrepresented communities? And what are the Texas Democratic Party strategy for increasing voter turnout, especially among unrepresented groups like young voters, community of color, and rural Texas?
So we are taking pride in our voter. We take a lot of pride in our voter protection program. And so part of getting out the vote is working to remove the barriers, right? That are there. So our mobilization program, again, through our Texas offense, when you go in to log in and ask for your demographics, and so it's asking you who you are, where you live, And we're using that data to strategically try to figure out how to connect them with the campaign, how to connect them with their local party, if they aren't already connected. And then again, our voter registration, our voter protection program, so that once they're engaged and ready to vote, then we can help make sure that they aren't affected by the suppressive voter registration laws that we have in place right now.
Okay. So, how is the party working to ensure that their leadership and candidates in the state is reflective of the diverse demographics of Texas?
So, this, like I said, I'm a fifth generation Texan, right? And Texas looks a lot different now than it did when I was growing up. And so I think that is very important. We need candidates who look like Texas. And you can only vote for people who are on the ballot. So you'd be surprised how many times I will hear, a specific race when the nominee is selected. Oh, why didn't we have a, check this box? Why is there no woman running? Why is there no person of color running? Why don't we have someone with this skill set? Well, you can only elect who's on the ballot, which is why the Texas Democratic Party is committed to a program that we have called Lone Star Rising, because we want Texas elected officials to look like Texas. And so part of that is engaging people to want to run for office. Like I said, this role as Texas Democratic Party vice chair is a volunteer role. I have I have a job, that I go to every day. And so a lot of times you'll have people who say, well, I'm interested, I don't know how to do this. And so we have a program called Lone Star Rising, and you can go to texasdemocrats.org/Lone Star Rising, and you can look to see, so we can recruit candidates who best represent their area. We don't want anyone coming into an area, particularly one that has been worked by our hardworking precinct chairs and our county chairs, to try to make that a viable Democratic seat, and then have someone come in that's not from that community and then take advantage of all the work that's being done. So we're trying to grow our own leaders.
Okay.
And so we do that by through this program that'll provide resources about how to run a campaign, resources on block walking. We have our voter network, which is a statewide network that helps them get access to voters. And so that's our commitment, to make sure that we put together a slate of candidates that reflects Texas. But we also, and we're not in the recruitment business going out and finding candidates, but certainly we know people in certain areas that if they express an interest, we want to be there, to help them. And again, because we're the Democratic Party, we don't get involved heavily in the primaries because those are all our candidates. So we provide all of them equal access to the resources. And then once our candidate is selected, then we work to get them elected. But Lone Star Rising is our program where potential candidates aspiring, and if you think you might be interested, go to texasdemocrats.org/Lone Star Rising, fill out the information so that we can be in contact with you to see what you're interested in, whether it's the county chair, city council, even our nonpartisan races, and particularly our legislative Democratic, the held offices. We want to make sure that our candidates look like Texas.
Okay. So what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the Democratic Party in Texas today, and how are you addressing them?
It's messaging. I think we talked about that earlier, right? Our platform is so robust, it meets so many needs that you can feel lost in it. We're not getting the voters out. We've done polling. We know that more Texans think like us and share our values than don't. So the challenge is, well, then why aren't they voting Democratic? One part of it comes with resources, being able to communicate effectively who we are. Then the other part is messaging. Like I mentioned, my career day, analogy. We need to know what the voters want in certain communities, and we have to message that. If you're in a strong veteran military service community, we need to remind them of the protections of the way that we're working to protect their services, to protect their access to veteran affairs. In strong communities of color, they need to see our commitment to equity, and how we have fought against these oppressive voter bills. And so it's about messaging, and it's really hard to be all things to all people. So I think it's unfair to expect Democrats to to do that and to message to everybody all at the same time. But we need to message to everybody all at the same time, which is why our social media is so important. Um, which is, like I said, why our platform, people going in and reading it. And I think people don't understand how hard we work to have a platform that represents our values, that represents who we are. And so I think that's one of our challenges, is connecting the dots from the person who's in the grocery line, who's expressing frustration about infrastructure, about the grid. I mean, all these things that are controlled by elected officials. And we're like, hey, we are putting up candidates who will work to restore the things that you need. We just need to remind them that Democrats are an option when they go and vote. And so I would say that messaging is probably the challenge. And then, of course, just the resources to get people out to vote. In high turnout elections, Democrats win.
Okay. What specific steps can Texas Democrats take to combat voter suppression, particularly in the light of the recent legislative change in Texas?
Absolutely. So, yeah, thank you for this. Again, the Texas Democratic Party has a renowned voter protection program. So we have poll watcher and poll worker recruitment and training programs. And so that's designed to give our election workers the tools that they need to navigate these new laws at voting locations. You have some people that have been poll workers for a long time, and then when the rules change, we want to make sure that they are up to date and feel comfortable in doing that. We also have a voter assistance hotline that's powered by our staff who do this every day, not temporary workers, but our permanent staff. So they can go and when you call, they can answer questions. We also have volunteer lawyers who will spend their time during early voting and election day, and even some now when you have questions, because it can be confusing. These laws they're designed to prevent barriers, so that we get discouraged and don't vote. And we want everyone to feel secure when they're voting. So we have attorneys and staff members that are there, to help them. We send user-friendly mail ballots out to our disabled and voters who are over 65, and even our college students, so that when everyone gets a mail ballot, they feel comfortable in how they're voting. So we're doing our part through that program to make sure that every eligible voter feels confident when they're voting. And if they have questions, that they know to contact us, so that we can get them in touch with an attorney or a staff member who's trained to answer those questions.
Okay. What are the main barriers to voting that you believe Texas voters face today, and what efforts are being made to mitigate them?
So I'm say that the main barriers, one, are these oppressive voter laws that are passed by the Republican legislature. So listen, we can do everything today now on our phones, right? On our smart devices. You and I are in two different cities and we're having this conversation. We can see each other, we can hear each other. The fact that Texas election laws have not kept up with technology is an indictment on the current legislature. The Republican-led legislature does not want to make it easy to vote. I mentioned earlier, I have a son who's in college. He's out of state. He's a freshman at Morehouse College, excited about voting in his first presidential election. The difficulty that he is having, he's an 18-year-old tech-savvy kid, right? They make plane reservations on their phone. They bank on their phone. They order food, order transportation. They can make hotel and plane reservations, but they can't register to vote on their phone. Why is that? It's a barrier. It's an unnecessary barrier that the Republican Party has created to make registering to vote hard and accessing a ballot when you're out of state hard. That is what they have done, which is why these elections are so important. So when he called me from Atlanta, when he was trying to fill out his application, he's asking these questions. And you know how kids can have like this derision in their voices because they're so much smarter than their parents before they go to college. And he's like, why is this so hard? And I said, son, it's hard on purpose because they don't want you to vote. So it's important that you vote so that we can elect people who will change these laws. Nothing about this system has to be hard. We can have same-day registration. We can link up our voter registration with our driving records like Oklahoma does and other states. We won't do this because we don't want people to vote easily. And so that's one of the main barriers is understanding why we do this. And so I reminded him, when you vote for your state representatives and your state senators, we can vote for people who will remove some of these barriers. And that's what we're trying to do. We need to elect more Democrats and people who understand how important it is to make sure that access to voting is easy. It's our constitutional right. Why is it so difficult? You can't even, my son and anyone out of state can't even apply for a ballot online. You have to print the application, put it in the mail to apply for the ballot. Those are unnecessary barriers. And I'll just say, he mailed his September the 5th from Atlanta. As of September 25th, the last time we checked, it hadn't even been received in Texas yet. It's not in the system. So you understand even the complications in our students who are excited about the space they're in all over the country. They want to vote in Texas. They want to help either turn Texas blue and affirm their candidates. They can't even get a ballot. His application has not even been received yet. He has to get to Atlanta. He has to vote. He has to mail it back. So these are the barriers that voters are facing out of state, the challenges in some of the voter purge, even when the application gets back, the ballot board has to review it and make sure that the signatures match. These are all steps that are being taken by a Republican legislature who does not want to make it easy for us to vote. So that would tell you why they're trying to stop our vote, because they know when we have high turnout elections, most people's values align with the Democratic Party, and they're trying to make it harder for us to vote. So what we are doing is we are having webinars. You can find information on our website about the mail-in ballot, about some of the other barriers, because we need to elect people who will help make it easier to remove these barriers to voting in Texas.
Okay, well, how does the party view the impact of Senate Bill 1 on Texas voter ID laws of disenfranchising, get that word out, can't get it out, minorities and low-income voters, and with legal and legislative challenges are being pursued to address this?
So once SB 1 passed in the 2021 session, you immediately saw Democratic senators begin to file challenges against the implementation of that law. Democrats are not sitting idly back watching while these harmful voting laws have taken effect. We continue to file lawsuits. You saw just last week, we had our Democratic lawmakers ask the Department of Justice to come in and investigate potential violations of federal laws and voting rights. So we are filing the legal challenges, but what you have to understand is that legal challenges take a while to work through the system. So we're not sitting back and just saying, oh, the Republicans have done this. So while we're also doing voter education, we are also trying to fight these through our court system by filing legal challenges to make sure that these laws, one, to see if we can stop them from being implemented, which we were able to stop part of it in 2021, but now we're continuing to file challenges and to ask for relief from the Department of Justice. So Democrats in Texas have not given up in trying to stop these voter laws.
Now, we have Greg Abbott, Ken Paxton, Ted Cruz, and Donald Trump are spreading false narratives that are harmful to Texas. How is the party addressing the spread of misinformation, disinformation, particularly regarding issues like the border, where the numbers are actually lower, illegal and ineligible voters, and school vouchers?
What we are doing is we are responding at every turn. We have a fantastic communication staff at the Texas Democratic Party. We just hired a new press secretary. And so every day we are turning out responses. So if you're looking to see what the Democratic party is saying. Again, texasdemocrats.org/media. You can see every press release issued every day, for the most part, almost every day, but certainly when a big issue comes up, because these are just non-truths. And as I mentioned, growing up in a, in a world where there was political diplomacy, when you could actually argue facts between parties, when there was actual discourse, and at campaign time, the campaigns would discuss issues and not attack character, and then parties had a chance to govern. What has happened is we've become a 24/7, 365 campaign cycle. And so what you see from one party is, like you mentioned, these false narratives, and just, can we just call them lies? Like I grew up in a time when you couldn't say the word lie, you get in trouble in your house. If you said lie, you had to say that's a story or not telling the truth. But these are flat out lies in some cases. And so we are combating those. So I would encourage your listeners to go to our websites, to follow us on our social media, because every time they say something that is false, that is harmful, particularly about the immigrants and what they're going to do with school vouchers, we are responding to that. So there was a statement at the first presidential debate released from Chairman Gilberto Hinojosa and myself in regard to some of those false allegations. So we are doing our part in trying to respond. So if you're not getting that, then please sign up for our email list. But you can also go see for yourself at texasdemocrats.org/media to see our responses about some of these really harmful things that they are saying and what our position is.
Okay. How is a party investing in local infrastructure and grassroots movement to strengthen its presence in smaller, more rural areas where the Democratic Party struggle all the time?
Yeah, so we can only invest where there are resources. So I know people hate to get the emails where we're asking for money, but a lot of our communication, with the exception of email and social media, requires funding for us to be able to do that. So we are investing in in these local races through our coordinated campaign, because the coordinated campaign is statewide. So Texas Offense, we've partnered with Colin Allred, who is our candidate for U.S. Senate, and so under his leadership of this campaign, we are able to reach some of those smaller communities, and so we're working through that. But again, we can only invest where we have the money. And so I would encourage listeners who are really concerned, if you feel like your area isn't being targeted, then reach out to our party so we can see where you are, because there should be some, it's my desire and my hope that we are planning a campaign where every every region is being reached, and they feel like they see themselves in that message, and what their community needs is being targeted by our voting there. But we need the money to do it, and that's why you get the text messages and the emails with us saying donate today, because the more resources we have, the more we're able to spread and do more grassroots work and actually come into the community, as opposed to just some of our our media buys. So if you want to see us canvassing in your neighborhood, we have to have the resources to do that.
Okay. What specific incentives are being undertaken to engage young people and make them more active, participate in political process in Texas?
Well, we have a wonderful caucus in the Democratic Party called the Texas Young Dems, and two of their leaders sit on our state executive committee, and so they are the voices for our young leader voices, and so they are doing so much. Like I said, we are on college campuses. The young Democrats also include those young adults who are post-college age or post-trade school age, and even those who didn't go to college and perhaps serving in our military. So the Texas Young Dems really are our voice. They guide us in our communications with our young voters. They know what the young voters want. Like I mentioned, I have an 18-year-old son, and we don't think alike, right? So the messaging that you would target to me wouldn't be how you would target an 18-year-old. And so we're really proud of the work that our Texas Young Democrats are doing in that space to help amplify our overall party message and to share our platform and strategies with our young voters.
Gerrymandering has been a significant issue in Texas. How does the party plan to address and challenge to ensure representation is fair throughout the communities?
So listen, every 10 years, it's a fight. And we have moved away from reasonable, if there is such thing as reasonable gerrymandering. Some of the ways these districts are drawn are drawn to one, ensure power of the Republican Party, and to limit the party and efficacy of our Democratic office holders. So every 10 years we gear up for, every 10 years we gear up for this when the lines are drawn. And so we will continue to do that. These current districts are in place through 2030. And so hopefully in 2030, Texas looks different. We have more Democratic legislators who are going to help level the playing field. Hopefully we have a Democratic governor and more Democrats in the Senate, a Democratic white gov, so that when the lines are drawn, we know that when Democrats are in charge, everyone does better. We're not interested in, the promotion of a few. And so in 2030, if we have a Democratic legislator, then we know that the lines will be more fair, and we won't have communities that are, lines that are stretched across 3 or 4 communities and sometimes across counties where you have different needs. And the person who is elected to serve them, it's difficult to serve and meet all those needs. So I would just say that's what we are looking forward to. The next time lines are drawn in 2030 is having that done, hopefully through a Democratic and with the support of a Democratic president, but more specifically a Democratic governor and a Democratic House and Senate.
Okay. I recognize this Texas is not a traditionally considered a battleground state. However, with significant population growth, particularly among African Americans moving to Texas, what strategy is the Texas Democratic Party implementing to engage and leverage this demographic shift?
So it's not Texas is not a traditional battleground state, but we're starting to see signs that maybe the national party thinks that it does. 2 weeks ago, Tim Walz came to Dallas. Governor Tim Walz, who is the Democratic vice presidential nominee, and just yesterday, about 2 days ago, in Monday in San Antonio, the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, came to Texas, and that's a clear sign that the national party is sending people into Texas. So by sending him into Texas to campaign for his wife, it's not her yet. But it's showing that perhaps Texas is more viable than we thought that it was. We believe it's viable in Texas, but now I think other parts of the country, and particularly the Democratic National Committee, is starting to see that perhaps this is a battleground state. And if we can elect Colin Allred, that's a game changer by sending a Democrat into the U.S. Senate. So part of your second part of the question is, how do we implement strategies? What are we doing? So it's reminding the nation that Texas is in play. And so we are sharing with them the data, what it looks like every election cycle. The last 6 years, we've closed the gap. So from 2016, so the last 3 presidential cycles, 16 and from 20, we've closed the gap in Texas. And so while we have not won, our margin of difference is continuing to shrink. And so that's what we are doing. And you mentioned that the African Americans in Texas, there are more African Americans in Texas than any other state in the union. We know that when African Americans vote, 8 out of every 10 African Americans, and it's more like 9.2, 90% of African Americans are going to vote Democratic Party because of our platform and the values that we express towards justice, equality, etc. So once we do that, if we get African Americans out to vote in Texas, we know what their vote will look like. So that's an important, we are a key part of the strategy. So we don't have to wonder with Black voters, if 10 of them go to the poll, 9 are voting for Democrats, because of our commitment to the civil rights movement and justice, all born out of, what the Democratic Party did in the 60s. So it's about turning out that vote. And I think the National Committee, the DNC, is starting to see that if there are more voters there, if we turn those voters out, they're going to vote for us. And so I think we're starting to see that. And so hopefully with Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman coming on coming on Monday to San Antonio for that rally, hopefully that's a sign that we're going to see more national figures coming into campaign for our ticket before this election.
Okay. In 2022, Senator John Cornyn replied to a tweet from President Obama expressing his concern over potential overturning of Roe versus Wade. In his response, Senator Cornyn called to overturn both Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education. What message do you think he is trying to send with that statement? Additionally, how can we encourage greater engagement among Black communities? And his tweet was clear indication of what Texas Republican Party has been doing for the past 29 years, taking us backwards.
Hey, as the other people say, he said what he said, right? I mean, I don't think I need to explain it because he said what he said. But the second part of the question is the most important part. What are we going to do about it? Most of the time, the Republicans are really clear about what they're going to do. They don't plan to catch us off guard. That's why the publication of Project 2025 is key. They are telling us what they plan to do, so that there's no surprises. So that tweet, that reply to that tweet says, we know what Plessy v. Ferguson was. We know what Brown v. Board did in terms of integrating our public schools, giving us finally trying to give us access to an equitable public education. So even to comment, right? If, whether he might explain it away in jest or he might have some context, they want to move us backwards. They have said that. Former President Trump has said, if you vote for him, you won't ever have to vote again. So what does that even mean? He's telling you that he's going to do away with elections. He's going to become a dictator. So they are saying what they want to do. Project 2025 says what it plans to do. Do away with the Department of Education. And you see that even in Texas with school vouchers. So Black voters need to understand, if you go look and see what one party is saying that they are doing, what the Democratic Party is saying that we are doing and plan to do, the choice is clear. We need to remind Black voters of that. We need to remind rural voters of that. They want to do away with public schools and give you vouchers for private schools. What private school are you going to in your community? We have and the Republican state reps that voted against school vouchers were primaried by their governor and by their lieutenant governor to make sure that they got removed so that when we go back to session, it's a different Republican. So you see how extreme they're going to try to get this plan through. So we have to encourage Black voters. If you're on social media, engage. There was a time, maybe many of you were like me in 2017, around January 20th, 2017, it became really difficult to be on social media during that administration to see some of the things, like we came up with terms like alternative facts and those things. But it's time for us to re-engage. We were disappointed and discontent, but it's time for us to re-engage. Whatever space you are in, listen to what they are saying. It's no surprise. They are telling you what they think. They are telling you what they feel about us. They are telling you about removing some of the rights that our parents worked so hard, our parents and grandparents worked so hard, some of them with their lives to ensure. So it is imperative that we get out the vote. And when they say they're going to do something, it's our job to go and vote and make sure those things do not happen.
Okay. What opportunities do you see for the party to grow and increase its influence in Texas over the next few election cycles?
I think I see, like I mentioned, with the gaps that we're closing in actually turning Texas blue. We think we're a purple state. Again, we're a non-voting state, which is why getting out the vote through our coordinated campaign and winning this U.S. seat and even winning Texas for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. I think that's important. I see over the next few election cycles, I see us closing the gap, which is why, and I think the Republicans see it too, which is why they've continued to try to make it so hard for us to vote. That's why they've tried to make it so hard. They've put in place these barriers to decrease our enthusiasm, to try to ensure that we don't go vote, because they know high voter turnout elections lend themselves to Democratic victories. So I'm looking forward to what is going to happen election night in 24 and in 26 and in 28. And I think by the time President Harris is running for her reelection in 2028, I think you'll see a blue Texas.
As we approach the 2024 election, what specific plans does the party have to ensure a successful turnout and voter engagement?
It's that coordinated campaign. I know I've used that a lot to answer these questions. That is our strategy. That is our blueprint for turning Texas blue. We are working together alongside the Call an All Red campaign, the statewide campaign. We know that in order to be successful, we have to reach as many voters as possible. We have great candidates running in almost every county. We are trying to ensure that we can win those 5 seats necessary to stop vouchers. There are 5 House district seats that we have to win, that we have to flip, so we get the vote to stop the vouchers. And so we are putting those candidates forward. If you go to our social media, if you follow us on our website, you can see where those targeted races are. And if you live in those areas, then you're seeing increased block walking, you're seeing signs, you're seeing the canvassing, you're getting the text messages. We are doing all that we can in 2024, one, to save public education in Texas. That is a primary goal, is to win those 5 seats so that we can save public education in Texas. I'm a public high school graduate. I don't know if you are, but you know someone who is. We all know the value of public education. It's in our state constitution. Students in Texas are entitled to a free, quality public education. So you've seen this play out as they begin to underfund public schools. And now you can see that they want to remove funding from public schools for these startup private schools that are not going to provide the same level of education. And so those are the plans that the party has with our voter engagement, to remind them what's at stake. It's one thing to say, hey, there's an election, and people go, oh, okay, that's cool. But if you say public education is on the ballot, for those voters who are listening who are in rural communities, if your public school closes, where's your child going to school? That's on the ballot. Mm-hmm. You've got to go vote for people who are going to help keep our public schools open and fully funded, because we underfund public education in Texas. All those things are on the ballot. So it's one thing to go vote for Call an All Red. That's great. If you're a woman who cares about her reproductive health choices, that's on the ballot. It's not just the person's name, it's all those issues. So that's what we're doing to make sure voters clearly understand the issues that are at stake, and you work toward those issues by electing the Democrats.
Okay. One last question. What is your long-term vision of the Democratic Party, the Texas Democratic Party, and how do you see the party evolving in the next decade?
Wow. Well, thank you for allowing me to close with this question. As I mentioned, I'm the vice chair Texas Democratic Party. I've been on the State Democratic Executive Committee since 2006, and I've seen the growth. I've seen how we've grown in our candidates. I've seen new strategies, the evolution of our social media. Our fundraising has been elevated, seen increased enthusiasm in our conventions. I love the state conventions. I was going to them before I could vote with my mother as a kid. So I've seen that. And so I love the coming together at the convention when you see Democrats from all across the state come together, and we work on our platform, and we work in our caucuses to try to elevate what is important. So I see that. I hope to continue to grow in this role. So I'm the vice chair. So, growth would imply, hopefully one day, assuming the chair leadership of this party and taking us into our next, over the next decade. Like I mentioned, in 2030, we'll be redistricting. So that's an opportunity. If we win these seats, then we can better shape Texas in districts that represent a more community values. But the first thing I want us to do is win these House seats so that we can stop school vouchers and fully fund public education. I think that's really important for us to do. And then I want us to elect a governor that will return Medicaid dollars back to Texas. We lose hundreds of millions of dollars in federal dollars for poor people in Texas who need better access to health care. And that can be done with the signature of a pen. It doesn't require anything else other than the governor signing his name to ask for the money. So I want to work to elect a governor who will help us do that, who will bring those dollars back. And so I see that over the next decade. I see us closing the gap. I see Colin already winning. I see us Texas really beginning to be a state that's in play across the country. I see us becoming blue, and what that means is better schools. It means better health care. It means a legislature that listens to the needs of the people. It means reproductive freedom for women in Texas. So that's what I see. That's what I'm looking forward to being a part of in this journey as I finish my vice chair role in 2026 over these next 2 years, working with our session. And then hopefully in 2026, hopefully we'll see launching a campaign that allows me to continue to work with our leaders for the next 4 years after that.
All right. I got to say thank you. That was very informative. The things that you brought to our attention, and we really do appreciate it. Shay Cathey, I can't say anything else, but you just keep on doing what you're doing and keep us informed of what's going on around Texas because, like I said, we got to get everybody informed and educated, and you have done that today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm honored to be here. This information is out there. Like you said, people have to go look for it. You can reach me at Shay Cathey on social media, ShayCathey, on most of your socials. And so I'm happy to be here. And thank you for doing this really important work. It's important that people stay informed and know exactly what we're up against in this election and that we're voting for issues. The people are going to advocate the issues, but we have to make sure that these issues get to the forefront so people understand just how critical this election is.
Okay, thank you, and we'll talk to you later on. And thank you for taking your time out and being with us this morning.
No problem. Thank you for
All right,
having
thank
me.
you. All right, everybody, that was Shay Cathey on here, and boy, that was informative right there. So it's just I'm with all right now because every time I do a show and an interview, I learn more, and that's what it's all about. You know, you're never too old not to learn. So remember that. All right, we're looking at straight up 12 noon in about another hour. We'll have another show with Dawn Richardson. She'll be on here at 1 o'clock, so stay tuned. Go ahead and take your lunch break and come on back. This is Ronald Gordon with Texas in Color.